I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to introduce some basic concepts in Buddhist philosophy, specifically suffering and emptiness. Ajahn Buddhadasa gave two talks in 1966 to students at Thammasat University in Thailand. These have been compiled and translated into a short book, Buddha Dhamma for university students. Its aim is to capture the key ideas of Buddhism. I encountered this book by way of an online course on Theravada Buddhism from the Open Buddhist University by Bhikkhu Kamarato, titled An Introduction to Buddhist Philosophy. I feel that the book sums up quite briefly what the main teachings of Buddhism are, especially what will be of interest to philosophers. I want to draw from it what is philosophically interesting to me, and I will intersperse the synopsis with my thoughts, which may be mine or drawn from other teachings. This will not be a scholarly effort. I will not reference thoroughly, and also it may not be clear where Buddhadasa's talk ends and my thoughts begin, since to separate them will be too cumbersome to read. I am not a Buddhist scholar, neither am I a Buddhist. However, I aim to provide a faithful rendering of the text insofar as I understand it, and I intend to understand it charitably, even if I may or may not agree with this rendering. I will then mount a critique at the end of the essay. Buddha says, "Now as formerly, I teach of only dukkha and the elimination of dukkha." Dukkha is often translated as suffering, but as many teachers have explained, it is not quite suffering in terms of pain or hardship, but more a sense of unsatisfactoriness. When I first encountered the term unsatisfactoriness, it was odd since the usual antonym is dissatisfaction. We may be dissatisfied with the service at one restaurant but satisfied at the next. Unsatisfactoriness goes beyond dissatisfaction. No restaurant can possibly be satisfactory. It is a state where everything is dissatisfactory. Life itself and whatever can come of it leaves us always dissatisfied, either wanting for more or less. Even when we get what we want, we are still dissatisfied because what we have do not last. What is of note in the quote is that Buddha says he only teaches about dukkha. His aim is clear: to liberate people from suffering. His aim is not to satisfy our curiosity on metaphysical questions such as the origin of the universe or how life emerged. Instead, given the universe and life as it is, we should understand what it entails, which is a state of unsatisfactoriness, and how we can overcome it. Buddhadasa picked 5 foundational themes among the many teachings of the Buddha. 1. The middle way. Our way of life should not be one extreme or the other. It should neither be ascetic nor luxurious. We should not self-mortify, but also not be hedonistic. Buddhadasa writes, "The middle way consists, on one hand, in not creating hardships for yourself, and, on the other hand, not indulging to your heart's content in sensual pleasures." By adopting the middle way, we can bring about conducive conditions for study and practice, the objective being to bring an end to dukkha. 7 noble virtues constitute walking the middle way: knowing causes, knowing effects, knowing oneself, knowing how much is enough, knowing the proper time, knowing individuals, knowing groups of people. It is to develop insight and wisdom. 2. Self-help. Buddha teaches that self is the refuge of self. We are not to rely on fortune and fate. We are not to rely on celestial beings, nor even finally on what is called God. We must help ourselves, explains Buddhadasa. Buddhas merely point out the way. Making the effort is something that each individual must do for himself. 3. Dependent origination. Buddhadasa writes, Buddhism is a religion of reason. Since everything happens in consequences of causes and conditions, and in accordance with law, by knowing the cause of something, we can then know how to stop that thing by stopping its cause. 4. Ethics. Buddha says, avoid evil, do good, purify the mind. These 3 points is a summary of all exhortations. Avoiding evil and doing good are common to all moral systems, but Buddhism addresses uniquely how the mind can be made pure, by not grasping and clinging, not even to goodness. We grasp and cling to objects of desire. It leads to a fear of not being able to have them, and then once we have them, a fear of losing them, and a desire to have more of them. It leads to an attachment to them, which leads us to view them as mine or as part of me. They become burdens. Even a load of precious gems is just as heavy as a load of rocks. So don't carry rocks or gems. Don't let there be any weight on your mind, elaborates Buddhadasa. Hence, avoiding evil and doing good is not enough. We also have to purify our minds. Purifying our minds is not to have any load weighing on our minds, weighing us down. 5. Impermanence. Everything is perpetually flowing, forever breaking up. That is, all is impermanent. So we have to equip ourselves well with heedfulness. We have to pay attention to the impermanence of things and not be mistaken into thinking that things can last forever, be it our lives, our happiness, but also our pain. Since nothing lasts, there is no need to grasp at or cling to anything. No amount of grasping will make it last forever. Buddha teaches that nothing whatsoever should be grasped at or clung to. It is this grasping and clinging that leads to suffering, since it is like trying to hold on to water in our palms. It is impossible in the long run and is hence futile. If we persist, it can only lead to frustration and despair. If we can put aside this practice of grasping and clinging, acting properly will come naturally. According to the teachings, when we are able to practice non-grasping, we are then able to walk the noble path and ultimately attain Nibbana. Following the noble path is possible as exemplified by the Buddha and the Sangha, which is the community of ordained monks and nuns who practice this non-grasping. And attaining Nibbana is possible as exemplified by the Buddha and other Arahants who are enlightened beings. How can we carry out this non-grasping in practice? According to Buddhadasa, when seeing something, just see. When hearing something, just hear. When thinking of something, just be aware of that thought, and so it is with the rest of our senses. The key is not to tack onto these sensations and perceptions the self-idea. There is no self, no I that is seeing, thinking, hearing, and so on. There is only the seeing, only the hearing. There is no self-seeing and hearing. There is then no liking or hating what is seen or heard. Because there is no liking or hating what is seen or heard, there is then no desiring for what is liked or desire to avoid or destroy what is hated. Because no desire arises, there is no grasping or clinging either. Because there is no grasping or clinging, there is no suffering. The emptying of the notion of self, in recognizing that there is no self, then leads to the cessation of suffering. It is not the world itself, nor the things in the world that causes suffering. It is the grasping and clinging to the world itself, or the things in the world, that causes suffering. However, this does not mean we do not use our senses and run into fire or walk off cliffs. Our senses still see the fire and still feel its heat. We can react appropriately, acting according to what is necessary and not excessively. Just do not be attached to the object sensed in order to avoid consequent desire that leads to grasping or clinging. Seeking more than one needs is a source of suffering and torment for oneself and a source of trouble to other people all over the world, writes Buddhadasa. The way to avoid attachment is not to have the self idea. It is not mine, there is no me. There are the eyes seeing the fire, there is the skin feeling the heat, but there is no me seeing the fire or feeling the heat. There is the body, but it is not mine. It is not me because there is no me. Yet Buddha teaches doing good and avoiding evil, right? It teaches concentration, meditation, and developing wisdom and insight. But then, who is doing all that? These are helpful conditions, but they are not the heart of Dhamma, not the essential matter, writes Buddhadasa. Merit-making and almsgiving are means for getting rid of self. Observing morality is a process by which we gain mastery over self, as is concentration practice. Acquiring insight serves to destroy self. Anatta or no self is a difficult doctrine because we are so used to and so enamored of the idea of the self, of the I. Buddha teaches the 5 khandhas, which are the 5 aggregates of 1. Physical form, 2. Feelings or sensations, 3. Perception, 4. Mental formations or thoughts, and 5. Consciousness, that give us an experience of a self. In other philosophies, such as Descartes, there is a similar concept of mind and body together constituting a person. I think that one reason why Buddhism breaks down the concepts of our bodies and psychology into components, aggregates, or heaps is to demonstrate that while there is a temporary connection between these heaps, nowhere do we find a self. Since there is no self but just heaps of stuff, and not even stuff but processes, there is hence no justification for us to be proud or egotistic. It is the sense of self that leads to self-centered actions, to the 3 poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, also known as desire or lust, anger, and ignorance. Since we know that the sense of self is the cause of greed, hatred, and delusion, the way to get rid of these is to lose the sense of self, so that they can then give way to their opposite: generosity, compassion, love, kindness, and wisdom. The 5 khandhas are impermanent, continually flowing and continually changing, devoid of selfhood. Because they are perpetually flowing, no one can consider them to be me or mine. What is Dhamma? According to Santikaro Bhikkhu, the book's editor, Dhamma defies translation. It can mean things, teachings, and the supreme absolute truth. He describes 4 meanings of Dhamma. Nature, all things including humanity and all we do and the nature of those things. Law, the natural law underlying and governing all those things. Duty, the way of living required of each individual being and all other beings with every breath and at every opportunity by the law of nature. Fruit, the result of duty done correctly according to natural law. The whole Dhamma is to be found within the body and the mind, explains Buddhadasa. According to this view, Buddhism is a journey inwards to learn about our physical and mental being. While it can be helpful for people to gather in schools, temples, and monasteries to learn about Buddhism, there is no necessity, since what needs to be learned is within us. In any case, according to Buddha, we need to work out what is taught for ourselves, trusting not to authority, not even the authority of the Buddha and the sacred texts, to tell us what is right. Therefore, study, investigation, experiment as a means to one's own realization of the truth, writes Santikaro. Buddhadasa adds that we need to have thought it over, consider it carefully, fattened it out, examine fully and see clearly for ourselves that it really is so. Part of this investigation is to compare any point of contention with the teachings of the Buddha, using the suttas, which are the discourses of the Buddha, and the Vinaya or discipline, which are the codes of conduct for monastics. Together, these two form the great standard. Yet, even the Dhamma is just a means to an end, not the end in itself. Buddha says, the Dhamma may be compared to a raft. A raft is a vehicle to cross a river, but once on the other side, as we journey on, there is no more need to carry it along. Hence, even the Dhamma is something that we should not cling or be attached to. It has a purpose to help us cross the stream, to cross beyond suffering, but it's not some kind of trophy to crow over or hoard. What is taught in the Dhamma? Buddhadasa gives us 5 key themes earlier and adds sunatta or emptiness. Sunatta does not mean physical emptiness. It is not about vacuums. It refers to how all things are essentially empty because there is nothing in any of them that either is a self or belongs to a self. Buddhadasa writes, one has the self-idea, which causes one to be subject to birth, aging, disease, and death. When greed, hatred, and delusion cease, the ceasing of delusion being the ceasing of ignorance and misunderstanding, then there no longer arises the false concept of selfhood. Then there is no more self to die. What ordinarily seems to be suffering is to not fulfill one's desires, to not crave or cling to our desires. But Buddhadasa tells us the contrary. To control oneself in order not to follow one's moods, to hold down the body and mind so that they don't follow such moods, is not dukkha. Rather, this is the way to defeat dukkha. He is referring to singing, dancing, and even laughing in this quote, but I think he will agree that grasping and clinging will also apply. To control ourselves does not mean we restrict our freedom. Freedom is instead found in being able to control ourselves instead of being enslaved to our desires. If we do not pursue our desires, what should we be doing instead? Buddhism teaches that we should walk the Noble Eightfold Path, which is to have right understanding, right aim, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These 8 points deal with morality, concentration, and insight. Buddhadasa suggests that sunatta will lead naturally to these 8 aspects. He writes, where we do not grasp at the 6 sense organs, that is, the usual 5 sense organs plus mind, and the things associated with them as being self-entities, then the Noble Eightfold Path will simultaneously arise of its own accord in all its 8 aspects. Why? What happens when the eye sees is that there is contact between the eye, its object, and our consciousness. From this contact, there arise feelings of pleasure or pain. The same applies to the other senses. The pleasurable or painful feelings cause us to want more of it in the case of pleasure or less in the case of pain. This seeking and avoiding is grasping and clinging. It amplifies the self-idea. I am feeling pleasure. I am feeling pain. We grasp and cling to how our I consciousness is mine. Because of this grasping, suffering ensues. We can overcome this by being mindful, by keeping constant watch over our thoughts, perceptions, feelings, and sensations, to remind ourselves that they exist, but they are not me and not mine. By developing this right understanding with the right mindfulness and concentration, we then can develop the right aim, speech, action, livelihood, and effort. Hence, through sunatta regarding our senses, we are led naturally to the Noble Eightfold Path. Where does this path lead? Before we can talk about its ultimate destination, we have to explain an important concept in both Hinduism and Buddhism: karma. The common idea of karma is that doing good will lead to good karma and doing bad to bad karma, which will bear fruit in the form of reward or punishment, be it in this life or future lives. It is a cosmic law relying on rebirth for this universal justice to be carried out. But if there is no self, as it is taught in Buddhism, then who is reborn to be rewarded or punished? Besides, doing good and avoiding evil is taught in all religions. The key difference is that in Buddhism, the objective is not about having a good rebirth. It is the cessation of karma and rebirth altogether. Buddhism teaches that merely producing good karma does not extinguish mental suffering completely and absolutely, because one goes right on being infatuated by and grasping at good karma. In other words, good karma still causes one to go round in the circle of birth and death, albeit in good states of existence. It is not complete quenching, coolness, nibbana. The aim of Buddhism is not to have a good rebirth, to reap the rewards of good karma and avoid the punishments of bad karma. It is to escape rebirth, to altogether transcend both good and evil. Nibbana is the aim. Nibbana is a state of supreme emptiness, the complete extinguishment of the self-idea, which puts an end to the cycle of death and rebirth, and hence an end to dukkha. Karma ceases with the ceasing of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. The old karma ceases with no present or future karma being produced. How that works is that there is a third type of karma, which is neither good nor bad karma. By ceasing greed, hatred, and delusion, this third karma is produced, which extinguishes the old good or bad karma. Earlier, the point on dukkha is that sensual pleasures brings its own unsatisfactoriness, its own suffering. The promise of Nibbana then is that in the state of Nibbana, suffering will cease, that satisfactoriness can be found there. The words used to describe this is Dhamma raga, a lust for Dhamma, or Dhamma nandi, a delight in Dhamma. The lust for Dhamma is not the same type of lust that is the lust for sensual pleasures. The satisfactoriness is instead found in sunnata, in emptiness, immorality, in nibbana. Remember, nibbana is about getting out of the cycle of death and rebirth. If it is deathless, that makes it immortal or beyond mortality. This satisfaction is hence enduring. It is not the everyday satisfaction of a good meal or sensual pleasures, which have to be renewed, leading to grasping and unsatisfactoriness because of their impermanence. It is the cessation of dukkha. Nibbana is not only something for after death. There is nibbana in the here and now, meaning on earth in this life. It is a blissful state, an eradication of suffering and defilements without any need for the extinction or disintegration of the five aggregates. How can it be attained? We have to live in the right way. But what is this right way? To live rightly is simply to maintain conditions such that the mental defilements cannot obtain nourishment and cannot develop, writes Buddhadasa, in order that the mind can be free from the suffering of grasping and clinging and empty of the self-idea. To do so would be just acting with constant awareness, acting wisely, acting with insight into the circumstances in which one is involved. In carrying out these activities, there is simply no grasping or clinging. By depriving the defilements of nourishment, we starve them and they thus fall away on their own accord. The defilements often keep arising because they are our habits, so familiar that they seem permanent and even inevitable. However, as with all things, they have no independence and no permanence. If we break the familiarity and stop feeding the habitual defilements, they start to decline in urgency, and finally the habit is broken completely. Buddhadasa explains by way of analogy. If we want to kill a tiger, we could pen him in with nothing to eat and he would die of his own accord. It would not be necessary for us to go in, confront the tiger, and let him bite and claw us. Hence, it is not about fighting the habit, but about just not indulging in it, which will allow the habit and familiarity to gradually fall away, putting it squarely within our abilities. A good karma balance can give rise to a good rebirth, even a rebirth in the celestial realm. But even these devas or celestial beings, blissful as their lives are still in samsara, that is, the cycle of death and rebirth. The Buddhist texts describe how even the bliss of celestial beings comes to an end as their karma balance is exhausted. In order to obtain a permanent happy state, they have to be reborn in the human realm because it is only in this realm that they can become enlightened, that they can attain Nibbana. Buddhadasa explains, in the human realm, there are enlightened beings, there are arahants, and there are the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. In the celestial realm, that jungle of sensuality, there are none of these things. Thus, celestial beings come to the human realm in search of the happy state. It is ridiculous that human beings here should want to go to the celestial realm for happiness. Even doing good or merit-making can be based on delusion and greed, in hope or expectation of reward, such as reputational gains, to get into heaven or a better rebirth. That is still grasping and clinging. Buddha tells us that while the merit remains as merit, such merit-making is of little value. Great merit is instead to be found in developing awareness of impermanence, even if it is only for a brief moment. Stocking up good karma can lead to a good rebirth, even a rebirth in the celestial realm, but the bliss there is still not permanent. Only Nibbana is a permanent state of bliss. Hence, living in the human realm gives us an opportunity to study, practice, and obtain the fruits of practice, a way of attaining Nibbana. To properly know something, Buddha teaches that we must know 5 things about it. 1. What are the characteristics or properties of the object? 2. From what does the object arise? 3. What is its enticing quality, its appeal, its allurement? 4. What is the hidden danger, the sinister power to harm that lies concealed in it? 5. What is the trick by means of which we can get the better of it? What is the device, the skillful means of escaping from the grip of this object? Buddhadasa elaborates using the analogy of fishing. The allurement of an object is like the bait, the danger is like the hook. The means of escape is the way to outwit the hook. The fish must have a technique for eating the bait without becoming hooked. The thing called the bait then no longer functions as bait, but becomes instead a good piece of food, he writes. To properly know a thing is thus to know its properties, its cause, its bait, its hook, and the escape strategy. The world is full of sensual allurements appealing to our 6 senses, but we are aware that this bait comes with a hook, which is the dependence or addiction to these sensual pleasures, seeking more of them, grasping and clinging to them, which then reduces our freedom and causes suffering when we are unable to obtain them or lose what we have obtained. They are impermanent, which means the allurements they offer have to be continually renewed. It is not that we should not experience sensations, but how can we experience them without being hooked on them? What is the strategy of escape? It is to realize that the idea of the self is the problem, that we consider those sensations our sensations. those things to be ours. When we give up the self idea, then since the sensations and things are not me or mine, there is no need to grasp or cling to them, which then means we are free from the suffering that comes with grasping and clinging. In Buddhism, those who manage to do this are known as stream enterers. Their realization is complete and they will never be hooked on the enticements of the world again. They have given up three fetters, three delusions: the belief in a permanent ego entity, doubt, and superstition. Buddhadasa tells us that while they have not given up sensual pleasures, they are mindful of the sensations experienced and so do not consciously fall into them because they have given up the three delusions of self, doubt, and superstition. The doubt refers to the doubt concerning Buddhism and its teachings. If one hesitates to believe the teachings, then one will obviously hesitate to adopt the practices that lead to the extinguishment of suffering. Superstition relates to false, ungrounded beliefs that yet affect the way we live. Buddhadasa illustrates these fetters using the four woeful states, which are commonly depicted on temple walls. They are hell, the realm of beasts, the realm of hungry ghosts, and the realm of cowardly demons. These realms are four realms that one may be reborn in, but these woeful states may also be our present lived experience. Hell is about anxiety, such as the anxiety of losing what we have. The realm of beasts is about stupidity. Here, Buddhadasa is talking about the stupidity of not knowing that the Dhamma and the Bana are desirable, of not believing in Buddha and Buddhism. A hungry ghost is one that is chronically hungry because his desires continually outrun the supply of goods. A chronic mental hunger, not hunger for bodily food. Whatever one has is never enough. The opposite character will be a contented person, though Buddhadasa is careful to clarify that contentment does not mean that one is degenerate. He writes, "Don't get the idea that being easily satisfied means one falls into decline and stops looking for things. Intelligence tells one what has to be done, and one goes about doing it the right way. In this way, one is filled to satisfaction every time one goes after something. One enjoys the seeking and then is satisfied. Going after something intelligently is not craving. One is simply doing what has to be done. For it to be craving or greed, it must be a wish stemming from stupidity. Hence, a wish to extinguish suffering or a wish with pure intentions to attain the Bana is not the type of grasping and clinging that is harmful. However, if they are pursued with pride or stupidity, then it is a grasping and clinging which is harmful. Hence, one does what needs to be done, which comes with its satisfaction, but one should not seek excess, since that leads to grasping and clinging. As for the realm of cowardly demons, it is about fear arising from false, ungrounded beliefs, from superstition and unnecessary fear. For instance, by being afraid of pain, we may make the situation much worse than it actually is. The fear may exceed the actual pain. Buddhadasa's point is that if we can avoid these four woes in our regular lives, we will also avoid being reborn into these states. Buddhadasa surmises, the whole essence of the teaching can be summed up as freedom from suffering through non-attachment. Hence this non-grasping and non-clinging, this absence of any idea of self or of anything belonging to a self is the most important teaching. Sunatta, the core and essence of Buddhism. As with all things, suffering has a cause. If we know the causes of suffering, we can stop the causes and hence stop their effect, which is suffering. To put an end to suffering, we hence have to investigate and find out its causes and then cut them off. Suffering arises from grasping and clinging, and thus, to stop suffering, we have to stop grasping and clinging, to cease attachment to things. The way to do that is to understand that there is no self, and hence there is nothing that is me or mine. There is birth, there is a body and a mind, there is aging, there is death, but none of that is me or mine. They are just bodily and mental phenomenal changes. They are impermanent. When we give up the self idea, these things and changes become empty. The five khandhas, which we mistake to be what constitutes our selfhood, can then become the receptacle of the virtues of arahantship. In my following critique, I want to examine the offerings of Buddhism and its philosophy through its various aspects of metaphysics, epistemology, psychology, and finally ethics, using the contents of Buddhadasa's book as the basis of examination. While Buddha claims to only teach dukkha and its cessation, he clearly has done more, for instance in teaching the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the five khandhas and the three jewels which are the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. His point in that claim is that he is not interested in addressing metaphysical questions, though Buddhism does have a rich metaphysics, such as its positing of multiple realms and the five khandhas. While he thought that we should not take any doctrine as truth on the basis of faith or even his authority, metaphysics is not physics. For instance, there is no way of establishing whether the Buddhist realms exist empirically. Hence, trust and faith may be unavoidable if the belief is to be maintained. That, however, is not a difficulty unique to Buddhism. Any metaphysical system, by virtue of its metaphysical nature, faces the same difficulty. This alone is not sufficient to disqualify them, since the questions we have are not just on matters that can be verified empirically or logically. We can analyze them on the basis of epistemic virtues, such as simplicity, internal and external coherence, explanatory power, and their fecundity in fostering philosophical thought, though just because a system is epistemically virtuous does not make it true. We simply have no way of ascertaining its truth. Buddhism is fecund indeed. Its doctrines have spawned multiple schools broadly categorized as Theravada and Mahayana, the Way of the Elders and the Great Vehicle respectively. Its doctrines have fostered a rich variety of philosophy since Buddhism's ancient beginnings, dating from the birth of Gautama Buddha in 6th century BCE, as captured in the Pali Canon's third basket of the Abhidhamma, and later interpreters such as Nagarjuna, with the Madhyamaka school focused on Sunatta. More recently, there is the Kyoto school on non-dualism, though all these may be considered to be still within Buddhism. Outside of Buddhism, Western philosophers such as Martin Heidegger and Arthur Schopenhauer have been profoundly influenced by Buddhist thinking, not to mention its widespread influence on culture, more deeply in Asia, but also elsewhere, such as the popularity of meditation, mindfulness, and Zen practices. At its heart, Buddhist philosophy may be simple as can be seen from the way Buddhadasa has tried to explicate sunatta and anatta. It may also be considered complex, for instance, the metaphysics concerning the many realms of possible rebirth, complicated by the syncretism of local beliefs. It's flexible as opposed to dogmatic doctrines that allow for such syncretism, also contributes to its fecundity as a religious movement spreading to countries with differing indigenous religions and incorporating some of these religions' beliefs, such as in India, China, Korea, and Japan. I'm agnostic about its religious truth, though as a wisdom tradition, its teachings are spiritually profound. It maintains internal coherency well because a core set of canonical texts serves as a common reference point, though not all points are agreed on by all its schools, which explains the proliferation of schools. As for external coherency, this is a matter that is the subject of this critique, though it does provide an encompassing worldview explaining life, existence, and the universe. I want to examine two questions which I personally struggle with as I consider Buddhist philosophy. The first question is there in fact a self? The second question is, if there is in fact a self, then what does this mean for the attainment of enlightenment? René Descartes in 1641 had famously written Cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. The idea is that an I is required to be the stage or venue for thoughts. Almost a century later, David Hume proposed that all that the I or the self is nothing but a bundle or collection of different perceptions, one that needs no underlying thinker for the existence of thoughts. The need for an underlying substrate is inherited from ancient thinkers such as the Greek philosophers. Aristotle proposes prime matter, a propertyless substrate upon which essences can be added in order to become a thing. However, in contemporary thought, we know that material things are made of atoms and molecules and not built up from a super addition of properties onto a substrate. Similarly, Buddhism suggests that there is no need for an underlying substrate, that the activities of the various khandhas can account for everything that is commonly characterized as the activities of a self. Is that, however, accurate? The properties of the various atoms and molecules constituting an object are unable to explain the properties of the object. Firstly, the atoms constituting a molecule do not completely explain the properties of the molecule. What we know about oxygen and hydrogen will not allow us to predict the properties of H2O. What we know about the molecule H2O is insufficient to tell us everything about a body of water. Even if we knew all the properties of the individual khandhas, our form or body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, we will still be unable to predict what a person will do next. Buddhism itself bears out what I am about to argue. Two people confronted with similar desires in similar situations and environments may choose to react differently. The first may choose to grasp and cling to his desires, while another, say a monk, may choose to renounce such grasping and clinging. From these come two arguments. The first is the argument from emergentism. The whole is composed of parts, but the parts and their relations are insufficient to explain the whole. There are many examples of this. I have talked about atoms, molecules, and their objects. Just from the cellulose structure of wood, comprised of organic molecules, which are then composed of atoms such as oxygen, carbon, etc., we cannot deduce that we will have a table. The same set of molecules could have also given us a book. Books and tables are clearly different things, with vastly different characteristics. Society is composed of many different individuals, but just by somehow aggregating the behaviors of the individuals, we do not get what is happening in the society. What is happening at the level of the society is different from what is happening from the sum of individual behaviors. There are additional effects that cannot be deduced from investigating constituent parts. Back to the human subject, even if we knew every single thing about the various cells, organs, and environment of a person, we will not be able to predict her behavior. This brings us to my second argument, the argument from free will. Even if we allow that our knowledge is not just on the physical body, but we also know the remaining four khandhas of feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and the consciousness of a person, we still do not know what the person would do next, unless we are ready to deny the free will of the person. Buddhism is not wont to do that, since it entreats people to adopt certain behaviors, such as not to grasp, to seek nirvana, to meditate, etc. If there was no free will, then to entreat people to do anything is futile, since they could not act in any other way than they have acted. Agential free will is an outcome of emergence. The organization of parts into a whole produces a new unified being, whose properties exceed the sum of the properties of its parts, their relations and their relations with their environment. We will be unable to deduce the properties of the whole merely from the properties of the parts and their relations. We are unable to account for a person's free will, even if we know all about the 5 khandhas of that person, unless we believe that a person is completely determined by her 5 khandhas plus any environmental causes, which is then tantamount to denying the free will of that person. Hence, while the 5 khandhas may be a good way to break down what constitutes a person's materiality and psychology, the body and mind, in order to examine each in turn, it does not follow that the sum of the 5 khandhas, even if we knew how to calculate the relationships between them to form the sum, and then between this sum and the environment, then completely describes the person. There may be no substrate on which the khandhas are added onto, but there can still be a novel entity that emerges from the organization and interaction of the khandhas. Buddhism's point behind the khandhas is that after decomposing the person into her khandhas, there is nothing left over that we can point to that is the self. However, this does not seem correct, as there is something that cannot be accounted for when we decompose a person into the 5 aggregates. Some call it soul, spirit, or will. Even if we accept the Buddhist argument that all a person is are the 5 khandhas, when these 5 khandhas are organized together in a particular way, the whole that emerges cannot be completely described by the parts and their relations between themselves and the environment. Nonetheless, the conclusion of the theory of the khandhas need not be discarded. A person need not be egoistic. Even if we admit that there exists a self, this sense of self can still, and according to Buddhism, should be transcended in order to reach a higher state. Before coming to the second question, which is, if there is in fact a self, then what does this mean for the attainment of enlightenment? We should discuss impermanence. Heraclitus teaches that everything is in flux. What we think of as a fixed and enduring being may in reality be a becoming that is continuously undergoing change. We may see a solid table that has lasted for decades, but that table has changed over time. From a distance, it may look as good as new, but close up, we see its chipped sides, its discolored surface, and its bowed legs. If left alone, it will eventually crumble into dust. If used, it will be destroyed even sooner. Yet, this does not mean that the table is hence not worth having, that it is useless or is nothing. It is something and has value even if it does not last. Even as dust, even when pulverized into atoms and then subatomic particles, it still is something, just not the thing it formerly was. That, however, may not be addressing the main point of the doctrine of impermanence. The point is that because all things are impermanent, they lead to unsatisfactoriness, to suffering, dukkha. Indeed, the need to continually renew things, to have new furniture, to have to put in effort to maintain and renovate one's home, to have to keep buying new clothes, to keep cutting one's hair and nails, to have to keep feeding and drinking just to keep the body alive, seem to be rather troublesome. However, just because something is troublesome does not mean it is not worth doing. As Hannah Arendt points out, the continual need for renewal because of a lack of permanence may bring its own form of happiness, a pleasurable regeneration which she even contends to be more real, less futile than any other form of happiness, because of its regularity making it more dependable. Besides, to consider something to be dissatisfactory is to compare it with something else that may be better. This restaurant is not satisfactory because the staff are rude. Another restaurant, or else remaining equal, will be better, more satisfactory, if its staff are polite. However, if there is only one restaurant in town, with no other alternatives for food, say because it also owns all the farms, then even with the rude staff, it will have to do. the alternative being to starve. Relative to starvation, the restaurant is better, more satisfactory. If there was a better alternative to not renewing things, to not buy new furniture when the old has broken down, to not maintain and renovate just to keep the home in good shape, to not have to cut one's hair and nails, to not have to eat and drink, that indeed will be better. We could of course not renew things by living with old broken furniture in a broken down home with long hair and nails and starving, but that is not quite a better alternative. A better alternative will be one where things like furniture and buildings do not suffer from wear and tear, where hair and nails remain a good length and in good condition without requiring renewal, where we no longer need food and water. Since such a situation does not exist, then there is no alternative, and hence there is no point to being dissatisfied. Nonetheless, an ideal state of affairs, even if non-existent, can still be imagined and so may still provoke unsatisfactoriness. In that way, Buddhism accurately explains that unsatisfactoriness is inescapable. Buddhism does promise an alternative, nibbana, which is a state of permanent everlasting bliss. It is meant to be reached by a denial of self, but if the self is undeniable in the sense that it genuinely exists, as is argued in the previous section, the self can nonetheless be renounced. Thus, nibbana can be sustained conceptually, even if anatta is metaphysically impossible. Renunciation may in fact be even more of a sacrifice, requiring a greater effort compared to no self which only needs to be realized. To know that pleasures are not empty, not illusory, not a delusion, that they can be enjoyed since there is a self to enjoy them, even if their enjoyment is temporary and needs to be continually renewed, and yet to turn away from them in order to seek a higher state of being, is that not more laudable? To renounce desire and anger even though there is good reason to be lustful and angry, is that not nobler? If there is no anatta, is sunatta endangered? It is, since its emptiness comes from there being no self. However, it need not be, since the renouncing of self through rejecting the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion in order to become generous, compassionate, loving, kind, and wise, can still take place by this self. Sunatta can still be an emptiness of selfhood, not because the self does not exist, but because being self-serving and selfish is futile, ignoble, and unworthy. The allurement and the danger, the bait and the hook of egoism are still there, and the escape strategy also does not differ. Rejecting the three poisons remains the way. Anatta then becomes not literally true, but a metaphor for renouncing the self in order to avoid evil, do good and purify the mind, so as to be worthy of nibbana. After all, if Buddha teaches only dukkha and the elimination of dukkha, that doctrine remains intact, whether the believer's conviction comes from realizing that there is literally no self, or from realizing that despite there being a self, renouncing the self is the right action resulting from the self's right understanding. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.